Hey everybody. So I'm Tori Pratt. I used to work here. I worked here for about 6 years, and I was the marketing lead, and I worked on a lot of really large content strategy projects. I'm currently getting my master's in analytics at NC State, which is the only reason I don't still work here. So my experience has been on projects like the Digital Commons redesign for the North NC.gov and all the agency sites, Campbell University project, and the NC Courts Discovery project that we I think wrapped up. Yeah. Wrapped up. It's good. Yeah. These sites are really huge and large, and most of the time when we're approaching a redesign, the first part is even to figure out what's there. But going through the content strategy process, there are a ton of really difficult things when you're working with huge sites and large organizations. So we're going to talk about a couple of the things that we've done well and figured out, and some tips that you guys may be able to take away to make it a little bit easier. So content strategy in general, it focuses on, you can read, but I'm going to read it also, focuses on the planning, creation, and governance of content. It's vital in designing information architecture of the website. So this structure for content strategy is from Christina Halbestrom's book, Content Strategy for the Web, and it's an excellent framework that we use to kind of make it easy to talk about, where the content strategy all revolves around the core strategy, which really aligns your business and your vision and your brand to the content. And from there, you also have the substance, which is what people consume. So how are you giving the information to help your users accomplish their goal? And what structure is it in? Is it findable? How is it organized? How is it laid out on the page where it's easy to read? And then on the people components, there's the workflow and governance, which is often the hardest part for large organizations because it's so siloed across multiple segments of an organization, and you may have multiple content producers or no content producers, and multiple owners or no owners, and all of it kind of becomes a large legacy site that you somehow have to manage and figure out what to do with. So the workflow and governance are really the parts that are designed to help you create content and manage content that applies to the core strategy of the organization. And without content strategy, you end up with a mostly useless website. This is an excellent example. Things on the front page of a university website, things people actually are looking for. So without really taking the user's stance on what their need to accomplish their goal, you might get a bunch of other things people personally feel like are really important, but may not be useful for the users who are going to your site. But the full name of the school will always be on there. And we found this as well. So working with large organizations, you'll also have very many differing opinions about what's important on there, and not knowing how to approach finding out what people need when you're working with what you have and what you've always had. So we have a framework kind of on how ABT approaches content strategy, and because it's usually for a website redesign, it usually takes on two types. The content strategy itself and then the content organization. And a lot of this is the framework for what we end up designing and building, and then how people end up using it. So I'll talk through this a little bit, and then we're going to focus on a couple of these key areas for the rest of the talk. But you start with the content inventory, which is really just a list of what exists on the site. And sometimes that is gigantic and really hard to create because it's totally separate, or you might not even know. We've worked on with some sites where, like the state government was a good example of this. They had external sites that they didn't even know existed. People in their organization might spin up like a small website for a very specific purpose, and then didn't tell anyone that they made it with all the branding and information and content supporting the organization. So a lot of that, we found a lot of rogue properties when we were doing this part. So the first thing is to get a full list of this. And I think for Campbell University, this one was around 8,000 pages. But for some of the agency sites, it was even more for the government. The content audit is the first step, where you actually look at what you have and you can assess, is this good, bad, correct, incorrect? In the past, the spreadsheet would be like 20,000 items long of pages that might be redundant, but you're not totally sure. So our process really was clicking on each link in the spreadsheet to see what's on that page, which is very tedious and but necessary, because if you don't know what's there, you might build a site and not bring over the information that you assumed what didn't work or wasn't there. Like, you may not, if you don't account for all of it, what you make may not encompass everything that your organization has. So it's a critical first step of any huge or any redesign project, really. The audit is where we get the subject matter experts in and we start talking about who owns what information, and what's the quality and status of it, and what's going to happen with this. Sometimes it's really obvious, so you have PDFs or something that you know, these are rules and regulations and these are obviously coming over to the new site and we're going to have to deal with this, and we know that. So you can do a status and an owner for these things. And then sometimes you go through that whole process and you have a huge chunk of a lot of content that doesn't have an owner and nobody knows who it belongs to or what to do with it. So this is an important part too in figuring out what is the status of the information you have. And then a gap here that we ended up filling after, I guess, going through this process a couple of times is this topics workshop, brainstorming, and research. We would look at what exists on a current site, but we would find that you can't only look at that because we're not really accounting for what you never made that people are looking for. So there's a ton of information that people are searching or would like to find on your site or expect to find, that if you don't make it, they have unfulfilled tasks that they're trying to do. So coming up with these topics and brainstorming research really comes up with a lot of the foundation for what the taxonomy or organization of the site might be, and other things that might need to be made before the project's done in order to make it successful. And coming out of that, we'll do some organization activities such as card sort, site structure, and the tree test. So this is starting to organize what you intend to put on your new site. And then schema and content models, figuring out what the layout and the organization of the information is going to take. Page description diagrams, page type and navigation design, and then go into gap analysis, content style guide. We start to figure out what are the actual words on the page. Now that we know what's coming over and what's not coming over, what needs to be created that hasn't been created, and what layout it's going to have, you can start to get a better understanding of how your design needs to work and what your constraints are coming from a content side. So some things from this, like that we've learned, is that there's an iterative process here in navigation, because like sometimes coming out of the content audit process, our categories are really broad, like there's a lot of them, and it's hard to collapse them because it isn't the same thing, and if we do, they might not be able to find it if we nest something under something else. So knowing what, like coming out of this, what our ideal scenario is for navigation can be a good way of leading into that, because it gives you something to work with, although it has to be balanced with, is this actually usable, is it overwhelming, is it difficult to navigate, and is it going to work? Can people find the information that they need? So sometimes this is a iterative loop where you work through it to make it good. So the rest of this, content style guide, editorial calendar, content writing and editing, on-site optimization, migration, and redirects, all of those are also necessary parts that come at the very end of this process to make sure that your new site for your huge organization encompasses all the information from your old site in a better format, in a better layout, and a more accurate, also like meets the needs of the users that you hadn't considered when you had made your initial site. So the new Campbell University site, when we redesigned that one, we found 8,000 content pages, and they had an objective of wanting to streamline the voice and brand of the university, because originally a lot of the content had been written by lots of different authors over a long period of time. It wasn't consistent. There was duplicate information spread throughout the site, so when something changed, you had to try to find every time it was listed so you can go update it. So by doing this process of inventory and audit, we were able to narrow that down and say you can consolidate this page and this page into one topic with one page, and make it a lot more easy to manage. And then create a site that had divisions that were naturally aligned to who should be producing the content. So you didn't have a writer writing it or nobody owning it and all this extra stuff just hanging out. So definitely the content audit is one of the biggest and most important pieces. And this is where, and I'll probably get into it, yeah, it's important to know what content you do have, where it can be found, so how can someone get to it if they can at all, and then how many people access this content, so what's actually used, because a lot of times too, if nobody's looking at the analytics for the page or nobody's aware of what's actually consumed or used from their users, if you don't interact with them, you may not realize what is valuable. So just a perspective on that might not be sufficient in creating a site that actually serves its purpose. So in our process, we ended up acquiring Blaze Content, which is an excellent tool, and I was a user of it. We found it, I think, through another user experience person at Atlanta BT had recommended it, and we used it for a large content project. And then the parent company of Blaze was going to discontinue it, and I was like, we have to scoop this up right now because I don't think I could do my job without it. Because basically it combines the crawler, it marries analytics, you can pull Google Analytics right in, it gives an interface and fields that make auditing really fast and easy, and you can have multiple users, so I could get the organization to help with this instead of us doing it ourselves, which really wasn't as valuable as having the subject matter experts do it anyway. So we acquired Blaze, and we ended up rebuilding it from the ground up, so it's really awesome. But it integrates the crawling content and content sorting, but what it produces is basically a data matrix that has a bunch of different variables that you can kind of customize your audit to be what you need it for the purpose, like for whatever purpose you're doing the audit for. But it makes it really easy to filter and drill down and make a content strategy a lot more actionable than it might have been in the past. And you don't have to work in shared spreadsheets. So it is so much better than that. And you can preview the pages from the inside the interface. So this is like a screenshot of it, but basically when you crawl it, it'll give you the URL, and you can kind of drill down and click into it, but it'll also, you can tag your content page or the type of page it is, the topics that are related to it, a status, and a bunch of other things that you can pull in, as well as analytics. So you could, like, one scenario is like pull your whole inventory, sort by page views over a certain time, and then audit, like approach a huge audit first by the most valuable pages people actually use. And going through this process, it makes it really easy to filter down to content owners and give them exported spreadsheets of, this is your content and here's exactly what I need you to do with it. And being able to segment and estimate content projects a lot better. It also, in the audit process, one way we used it was if you tag the type of page it is, the end result is a list of every type of page you have on your site. So when you're going into figuring out estimating a project or estimating a level of effort for redoing those templates, you know how many templates you have and which pages are associated with them. So it makes it really easy to go back and say, I need to find all information related to this topic owned by this person in this template. So we do the content analysis. We also look at some subjective criteria but is still really valuable, like findable, actionable, appropriate, relevant, outdated, and trivial. And there is a feature in Blaze that was cool that basically you can do a 1 to 5 ranking on any of this criteria, and then it can kind of visualize a segment of the content. So I could isolate, for example, like ABT, if I isolated our marketing content, I could see like maybe we're high ranked for findable, but like low actionable. Like we can see we can visualize our weaknesses in any given area of content. So it gives you direction and a place to start when you're trying to rewrite it and you don't really know where to go. Do we have demos of Blaze today?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. You can probably see Dan for.
Right after this, just come see me.
Yeah, because he can show you what that looks like. Content governance is also a huge one that really comes up for large organizations and less for small sites that usually only have 1 or 2 content owners. But the more people you have in a system, the harder and more complicated it gets to make sure that everyone is following the rules that you set when you initially designed it. Without governance, people can make whatever they want and put it on the site, basically. Or the opposite of that is that you have a bottleneck and nobody else is producing it except the web person, and then it takes forever to get something up when it can be a pretty quick change. So some really important things on this is establishing upfront when you're doing that audit process, what people's roles are with the content. Are they an editor? Are they a writer? Are they the subject matter expert? And then creating a process internally in order to work together to get the content produced, created, or updated. And creating that content production workflow is important. So that's figuring out if somebody writes it, who do they have to get approval from? Who does the subject matter expert usually will have to review it, then it'll have to go to the editor, and then it'll go to legal to make sure it's okay to put on the website, and then it goes into a queue. And all of this can be automated, and you can probably talk to anyone who works at ABT to talk about that. But it's really cool and really important. It lets you give control to other people without the risk of them going totally rogue and putting up something that you wouldn't want them to. And it's also important to maintain consistency in the brand, and governance is a great way of doing that. And so we usually do that by creating a written style guide, and Alan I'm sure would be a good person to talk to about that. But that gives clear direction and outline and standards and examples for what content should go on the website and how it can be formatted and written in a way that supports the brand vision, the brand voice, and creates a uniform experience on the site. And without that, it's very obvious. You can go to sites and you can tell one page is written by somebody different than the one you were on before. And it does create a really disjointed experience, especially when you're like the average time you spend on a site is like a page is like a couple seconds. And if the information isn't in the same place where you expect it to be when you're clicking through a site, it like throws people off, and it can make it's not easy. Basically, it creates friction in their experience. So a written style guide that's distributed to any editor and integrated in the content production workflow is a really great way to make sure that people are writing the way you want them to for your website. And Haven isn't here, but I'm going to hand it over to Daniel,
What does she do?
who can talk a little bit more about our Campbell redesign project.
All right, thank you, Tori. So, hi everybody, my name is Daniel. I'm Director of Project Management here at Atlanta BT. Worked very closely with Haven and on this project for a long time. She is a great client of ours, and unfortunately, since we're missing her tonight, we'll try to line her up some other time to come speak to you all. So, I can tell you a little bit about her and who our client was in this specific example within content strategy. So, Haven leads the marketing communications team at Campbell University, what we call the CMC team, Campbell Marketing Communications. So she leads that team, led the content strategy for Campbell University, governance wrangler. I have to talk to her sometime about that, but they are not unlike many universities where you have a central team and several schools who have varying degrees of independence. And at Campbell University, their background was they were very independent, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And of course, we'll miss her today because of the issue where she's staying on campus. So I can speak a little bit to the background of really why they even came to us. Again, they have the central team, 10 units, right, 10 schools. And so what that happened was they've been around for 130 years. So for 130 years, those schools have had all that time to create and promote their own brand voice, tone, messaging, content, CTA styles, all those things. And they had the different technology stacks to do it. Some folks were on WordPress, some were on Expression Engine, some were on Cold Fusion. So they was very disjointed on the tech stack behind it, and also the people who are responsible for it. Because each school has their own content owners responsible for what they're putting out. So Haven and her team, who are in charge of trying to make sure that we all sound good together, found a lot of challenges in that realm where you had everybody kind of going their own direction. It was very obvious in the digital space. Tori gave the example of people spinning up their own like microsites or things like that. Often, I know Campbell's team found out about those sites as they were crawling online and like, oh, we had this site. We didn't even know we were registering people for this thing. So for them, it was a little bit chaotic. And the sites were all different. The URLs were all different, that type of thing. They had outdated or repetitive content because you had different schools creating the same events, right? So they had a lot of repetitive content and a limited support staff. They had 2 developers and 1 designer. So within the process for us of working with them as a client, they were fantastic, right? So they were talented, they knew what they were doing. So for us, we were supporting them as they were the owners of this project and ultimately the product. So what they wanted to do was to think globally. As everybody had their own style, they wanted to bring it all together so that everybody would have the same experience, whether you were on the School of Medicine, the School of Engineering, or whatever. You would know essentially that these people work together, right? Now the same mission, and same look and feel, and same voice. So Alan and Tori did a lot of work working with that team to help position them to be able to set that tone, work with their audience, to gather all of their input. Because one of the biggest challenges that they had to work with was not only to build this website that would help give them that unified look and feel. That was the easy part. They had to do the work of trying to get buy-in from their folks and trying to figure a way to, like, hey, you're not going to have as much power as you used to, but that's really good because of X, Y, and Z. So we were working with them on that approach to try to help get that buy-in. They wanted every school to be able to feel heard, to understand that they can still produce their own content, and you'll still have a lot of permissions in this great new world, but we've got to restrict some things. And so
that's crazy talk.
It is crazy talk, but it's attainable. So they had really, again, for the first time, this unified mark. This is a representative of Kivett Hall, which is their probably most well-known landmark on their campus. And so they had this mark for the first time that governed everybody. So no matter what website you go to within Campbell's property, you're going to see the mark. And you're going to see basically the foundational styles at the top and the bottom of each of those web pages that basically says no matter where you are, you're on Campbell University. And so that was very important to them. That was like goal number one of the project. Try to be common among the design, the content, that type of thing. Shared resources, they wanted to bring everything in-house. Again, we're talking 10 completely different websites that they had, not including their main one, different support staff, different content owners, things like that. So they're trying to centralize that as much as possible. And then, of course, eliminate redundancy. When you have that many cooks in the kitchen, you're going to have a lot of waste and inefficiencies. So, trying to get these people all on the same board and go in the same direction, they essentially had it, but they didn't need to promise essentially uniqueness within that sphere, right? So we're all going to be the same, but you're all going to be unique somehow. So that was the messaging that they were putting out to their audience while we were going through the production of the product. So you can see here, for example, they have the Norman Adrian Wiggins School of Law. So on the School of Law website, you're still going to see that Campbell mark with their individual mark. And so all of the schools adapted to their individual mark. But everybody was part of the process. So as Tori's team was collecting all that inventory in that very large spreadsheet, Haven's team and the teams at each school were part of the audits, were part of the optimization. And this gave Haven's team a lot of authority and influence on saying, hey, this is good, but it needs to be written in this direction, to this end. And that brought everybody aligned to the same goals. Technically speaking, we created for them within WordPress a band, what we're calling a band content system, that essentially said, you can design whatever you want the page to look like, but here's the framework. Here are the elements. Here are the predominant colors. Here are the secondary colors. This is what you can choose and what you can't. So they all have freedom within a certain framework to create their content. So that's where they were able to win over their audience on, you're each going to be able to do it yourselves. We're not trying to have the exact same template for everybody. It's going to be unique, just here are the rules. Here's the sandbox you got to play in. And then each one of them went through extensive content audits. So they all have customized navigation. You've got your global navigation for Campbell University, your specific school navigations for each website. So we were able to build that system in there for them. But that's where they were able to say, you can still have this uniqueness. And within WordPress, we now have content production workflows. So they have users with certain permissions at the schools. And really, Haven's central team has the ability to make sure that all the content that's being produced is aligned to the vision, to the brand, that kind of thing. So that's what they were able to do within the project. And now, life with their site. So this is a very simplified way to present a large year-and-a-half project in one slide, but essentially, we've been rolling out their websites in phases from January through August. We're done with that now. We provided them with instructions on how to use WordPress, and Haven's team themselves actually trained the users at each school on how to use WordPress and how to produce their content. So not only were they teaching them the technical capacity to update their content, they're also giving them guidance on how to write it according to that common message and common tone, that kind of thing. So we give them that document to use and make it their own. Governance, as Tori was talking about governance, they also have governance guides for these people. How to post on social media, how to write these articles, what to promote, that type of thing. They have editorial guidelines. We have a public-facing brand style guide for them. That's actually its own website within the whole ecosphere there, and social media guides. So now as we go on and continue to have feature updates, feature releases, that type of thing, they now have been able to hit reset, give themselves the foundation that they need to bring it all together. They've achieved that first goal of brand unification, and now working towards the things that they want to work towards, right? So instead of looking backwards and trying to catch up and finding things that they don't like and finding things that are ineffective, they now have that foundation. Say, okay, we're all unified, we're all together, we're all moving towards the same direction. Now how do we optimize that? And what are we finding? And so they're getting to now study the things that they want to study, which is essentially effectiveness of their content and how it's being positioned, and just continually optimizing. So for them, they're finally in a good place for them to be able to do that. But that is it for my Haven talk.